Hello everyone, and welcome into another socially distanced production of School Talk here live from the WJHI studios. I'm Clay Abels. Alongside me we have student Stacy Wilder, and over all the way to the left is our superintendent of Greater Clark County Schools, Mr. Mark Laughner. How are we doing today, sir?
Great. Thanks for having me back.
Excited to have you in. A lot of topics we're going to cover today about the start of school and facility projects and whatnot, but I actually want to start off with a student perspective, and that's going to be Stacy Wilder here from our WJHI program. Stacy, give us our student perspective and what's on the minds of students here with your question.
Students were wondering how you think athletics fit into education.
Well, I'm a big proponent of both, obviously. Academics has to be number one, no matter what. But from my experience in K-12, going to school myself, I was an athlete. I see the value in athletics in terms of time management skills, work ethic, collaboration, all those things you learn when you're on a team, you're competing in athletics, and just that desire to compete, and win is very, very important. And I think it can help a school community and also a community in general, and so I'm an advocate that we have to have both strong academics and strong athletics here in Greater Clark at all of our schools, and that's one of the reasons as a school district we're trying to invest in our athletic facilities, whether it be the turf in the football fields. We have plans to do other projects, the tennis courts. We would like to do something with the pool. I'm a big proponent and supporter of athletics, and I really believe that more students should be involved in athletics or extracurricular activities. So it's something that's very important to me. And I will tell you, I probably wouldn't be sitting in this position I'm in as superintendent of Greater Clark without being involved in athletics. It's something that as a high school student, it's what motivated me to do well in school academically. It's what motivated me to go to school every day because I wanted to play baseball. I wanted to play basketball in high school and wanted to play baseball in college, and ended up doing that. So it's very important to me.
That was Stacy Wilder with our student perspective question there, talking a little about athletics and education, how it all comes together. It's actually going to come up well later in the show when we talk about some of our facility projects. But Mr. Laughner, I want to start with this. We're now 4 weeks into the calendar here, school year starting up and going. It's really the first time I think you and I have met together where it looks like we're going to have a normal-ish school year from when we first started School Talk. Tell me how in the last couple of years, now that you've gotten into being the superintendent for multiple years now, how is this school year easier or better than in past? Because really since you've taken over, it's been all COVID. So how have things been different this season?
Well, first of all, we've gotten off to a great start. I mean, it's been a very smooth start to the school year, whether transportation. Daniel Boer's done a great job of getting transportation organized and making sure all of our students being picked up and getting home. The big difference this year has been we've been able to focus specifically on academics, and not all the COVID stuff and PPE stuff, and coming up with plans on how we're going to social distance and still have school, and having to quarantine kids and trace down kids that were exposed potentially. So our principals, our teachers, even at the administration building, the people I work with up there, we've been able to put all of our focus in on how do we improve academics, how do we get our students to grow academically, and that's what we're here for. That's what we all signed up for as educators, is to grow students, academically, socially, emotionally, and so we're happy that we've gotten off to a smooth start, and that can be our focus this year.
I know one big thing for you coming back into this year, we've all heard about across the country, the COVID gap. You have students last 2 years, they've been in and out of school, online classes, same with teachers in and out, not having the same daily lesson plans, things like that. How are you working on making sure everybody stays on track and trying to get students back to where they were before COVID?
And it depends on the level, obviously. At the high school level, it's really about credits and really identifying those kids that are not on track to graduate. And then the high school principals, high school counselors put intervention plans in place to try to get those kids caught up with their credits, whether it's doing some online classes through Plato or whatever. But our goal has always been in this district that when a student finishes the 9th grade, they should have at least 10 credits. When a student finishes the 10th grade, they should have 20 credits. When a student finishes the 11th grade, they should have 30 credits. That keeps them on track. And if they're not meeting those thresholds or that criteria for 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, then our administration at the school level is identifying those kids and making sure they get into a credit recovery program to get back on track. And then K through 8, we're looking at student performance on iLearn testing, on iRead testing, on our NWA testing. We're trying to identify those kids that are behind and then get interventions for those students, whether it be in literacy or math. We're doing a lot of training with our teachers in the Orton-Gillingham model. There's a video that was just put out to all parents last week about that model in terms of how to teach reading and how we're trying to teach students to read. So we have a lot of interventions in place to try to catch those kids that are behind and get them caught up. But the one thing I'll say is that takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. And the other thing I would say is any help our parents can give us at home, will help speed up that process. Whether it's making sure your child reads at home a certain amount of time, or just working with them on math facts or their letters, things of that nature, vocabulary. It helps the teacher, it helps the school, and it helps the child.
I want to transition to a second where we talked about facility projects. Stacy brought up earlier with her student question, athletics and education, how they mix. Last time we had you in here, I know you were talking about the athletic facility projects with Jeff in Charlestown, things of that nature. Tell me at this moment, not just athletics, but in general, what are some of the projects on your plan, and how are we fitting in with that plan in terms of getting the facilities done and where we're at in the current process of your overall plan?
Yep. Well, currently right now there's projects going on at Riverside Elementary where there's 6 classrooms getting ready to start within the next month. And then North Haven Elementary will also have a new gym added on. We're also expanding their cafeteria and kitchen because they need more space for the students there. And then we're going to renovate the old gym into 4 new kindergarten classrooms. Now the other thing that's going on, and you'll see it here at Jeff High, is they're building the new tennis courts. That's already started. They're moving dirt. That's 12 new tennis courts and a new building out there for the tennis program. And then the other things that are still to come and should start in the next month or two is the locker room, weight room here at Jeff High. That should start in the next month. So there's a lot going on. Now coming up, one of the things we're going to ask, I'm going to ask the school board and the community to support will be the replacement of Parkwood Elementary, and that's Parkwood Elementary in Clarksville. Has nothing to do with Parkview. Parkwood is a building that it's been very, very poor condition. We're going to ask the school board to vote to replace that building. And then the other thing that we're going to ask the school board coming up later in the year is to build a new natatorium here at Jeff High to replace the pool here at Jeff High. The Jeffersonville High School pool is 50 years old, and it's had no renovations or repairs in 50 years. And so we have to do something with it. And so what we're finding construction-wise is to renovate Jeff High's pool is going to be a very, very costly endeavor. And it only has 6 lanes, and you need 8 or 10 lanes. To renovate Parkwood will also be a very, very costly. It will cost just as much to renovate, or right at that same cost as building a new facility. And so things have changed a great deal over the last 2.5 years with inflation and just how things are going. And so we've made the decision we'd rather replace Parkwood Elementary versus renovate it, so that we would get 50 years of life on that elementary versus 20 years added on to a renovated building.
Well, one thing I wanted to touch on when you mentioned projects, one that you already have done and finished and it really came out well was down at Franklin Square. You had the Greater Clark Pilot Elementary STEM program that you were up and able to get going. Went down there for the first day of school. Tell us about the idea behind that and some of the great equipment there. From just seeing the pictures and some of the videos Greater Clark put out, it was really impressive work, especially for an elementary school to have all those options.
Yeah. And that's really our pilot school, Franklin Square. Is we want that to be our first elementary that becomes STEM certified by the state. And so we're really pushing a lot of energy and effort and resources into that. We were fortunate that the Cal Ripken Senior Foundation supported those efforts and donated that STEM equipment that will help students learn to code and robotics and things of that nature. And so it's a great program, and I will tell you it's something we want to take to the other elementary schools throughout the district once we get it up and running at Franklin Square. For example, as we've planned and designed the 2 new elementary schools for the district, especially the elementary school that's going to be built at the Wilson property, which that construction, by the way, will start in March of this school year, the new construction on both new elementaries in Jeffersonville and Charlestown, is we want to make sure we have STEM labs in those new schools. And so we're designing these schools to have STEM labs to really amp up student interest in STEM fields and STEM education.
Here with Mark Laughner on School Talk today, August the 18th, talking a little bit about some of the future upgrades for Greater Clark and also beginning of the school year. And I guess it's a good time to transition to really our last big topic of the day, and that is being Parkview Middle. I know there's been a lot of discussion lately about zoning and where the school is going to be at and trying to build a new school. Tell everybody about the whole idea behind Parkview Middle and what your plans are for that with Greater Clark.
Yeah, well, first let me say we didn't just haphazardly pick out this property to build on. We've done numerous studies over the last 2.5, 3 years, and by that I mean a demographic study, a facility study, a tax, property tax assessment study. So we have a tremendous amount of information at our disposal to make this decision. We just didn't pull this out of the sky and said, well, this is where we want to build a middle school. The other thing that we've done is looked at sites all over Jeffersonville, up and down 8th Street, up and down 10th Street, trying to find property to build on. Because one of the things we determined early on is that to build a new middle school on the Parkview site would just not be possible because it's landlocked. The site's only 11.5 acres. And the industry standard for a middle school across the country, and this is what architects would tell you, the industry standard for a middle school is that you should have at least 20 acres and then actually 1 acre for every 100 students. So if you have 800 students in a school, middle school, you really need 28 acres for a new middle school. 20 acres plus 1 acre for each 100 students in the school. And so we, obviously it's tough to find over 20 acres in Jeffersonville right now. And so we found the acreage at Twilight, before it was the Linford property or New Chapel, Utica-Sellersburg property out there that had 26 acres. And we're pursuing that, buying that property to build a middle school. And we think it's the right location for a new middle school. The reason we think that's the right location for a new middle school is because our demographic study shows that that's where the growth of the city is going, and that's where our enrollment is going and our student population going. I'm going to share some data tonight at the community meeting at Parkview that I think will be very interesting, that shows over half the kids that attend Parkview live north of Allison Lane. And what you would call the true downtown students, and we had the barrier or the cutoff be the railroad tracks right next to Parkview, which is right there by the East Lawn, the old East Lawn School. South of those railroad tracks, there's 155 students that attend Parkview Middle School. So that's pretty telling to me that over half the kids live north of Allison Lane that attend Parkview, and that area north of Allison Lane is only going to grow. That's where we're going to see the growth. So that percentage of students living south of Allison Lane that attend Parkview versus north of Allison Lane that attend Parkview is going to become a wider and wider gap because more middle school students are going to live, up this way past Allison Lane. The other thing we found with data, and I'll share it tonight, is that there's been a lot of talk about the walkers, and there's a bunch of kids that walk to Parkview Middle School, and we have found that that's not the case. We've been counting those numbers every day of school since we started school this year, and it's actually less than 10% of the kids walk to school at Parkview Middle School, and that's during warm weather. I can tell you, I was principal there from 2005 to 2012. When the weather gets cold, that number gets cut in about half. So it'd be less than 5% of the kids would actually walk to school at Parkview when the weather gets bad. And so we feel like we need a middle school out past 265, out in that area, on the north side of Jeffersonville, because that's where the growth is. And if you just look at the data right now, it tells you that most of the kids, a majority of the kids, live up that way.
For you, when you go through this whole process trying to build a new middle school, tell me, I know you said for you guys it starts with studies and looking and seeing what you can do, but for you, I know you said tonight, and this is a good reminder, August 18th, 6 o'clock, you guys will have a Q&A session at Parkview Media Center where people can come out and you're going to share presentation details. But when you go through this process, and I'm sure you explain to the people tonight, how does it work? Does it go from study and then you try to meet with the zoning committee? How does it work for you all for this process so people can stay up to date? What's the process of where it goes from A to Z to get it done?
Yeah, well, it started with the studies, facility study, demographic study. The facility study, even the one in 2014 we did, both of them said that you need to replace Parkview Middle School in the near future because it's at the end of its life. And so you take that information from there, then we created a task force that had community members from each of our communities, Clarksville, Charlestown, New Washington, and Jeffersonville. And we let them evaluate and look over the facility study. We didn't hide anything from them. And we asked them to come up with some priorities that they thought Greater Clark should address as far as facilities. One of those priorities was obviously to take care of some of our elementary schools and build 2 new elementary schools because TJ, JJ, Wilson, and Pleasant Ridge were 4 of our elementary schools that were in the poorest condition and were costing us a lot of money. That task force was excellent. We had it was almost 70 members show up to each meeting and gave us feedback on what we should do. One of the things that came from that task force is you need to replace Parkview Middle School. We need to look for property as close to downtown as we can get it, and that's what we've done. We've tried, like I said, we have looked, for the last year, we've looked up and down 8th Street and 10th Street trying to find 20 acres or more to build a new Parkview Middle School on. And the best property we could find is the Twilight property or the New Chapel, Utica-Sellersburg property. And from there, once you get a purchase agreement on the property, because one of those properties is zoned residential and the other is zoned commercial, we have to ask planning and zoning, the city of Jeffersonville's planning and zoning, to change the zoning to institutional for us to build a school there. Once it goes through planning and zoning, then it has to be approved by the city council. And after the city council approves it, then we would have permission to build a school on that site. We feel very strongly that that's the site we need to build a middle school. We do not believe as a school district that we should build the middle school, the new middle school, on the current site. Like I said before, it's 11.5 acres instead of 20 or more. It's landlocked, has railroad tracks on one side, the Little League Park on the other. There's been discussion, about the Little League Park. We've been told in the past that wouldn't be available. The other thing that really sort of sealed the deal on us not building the new middle school down there was the demographic study. One thing I didn't mention earlier is the demographic study plainly shows that the enrollment in the Parkview area and Parkview Middle School will go down over the next 5 to 10 years. It will actually, when I was the principal there in 2005 to 2012, we had 800 or more students every year I was the principal there. They're now at 725 students at Parkview Middle School. The demographic study shows that number will actually drop below 700 students in the next 5 to 10 years. In 10 years, it shows that it'll bounce up a little bit over 700. But the demographic study shows that it will never get back to over 750 students based on the next 10 years study. And it shows that it definitely won't get close to being back over 800 students. And so to me, the city's comprehensive plan is development out to the north side of Jeffersonville. Whether it's the widening of Charlestown Pike or the development out by the roundabouts, all the homes that are being built out that way, and we need to follow that growth. We need to do what's responsible in terms of the school district. And I will say, some people ask, well, why don't you keep Parkview and build a new middle school out there? Well, the enrollment doesn't support that. The enrollment support's just having one middle school. It also goes back to what we've talked about in the past. Greater Clark has always had too many buildings in its district. When you look at other school districts across the state that have about 10,000 students, they typically have anywhere from 13 to 14 buildings. Greater Clark in the past has had up to 20, 22 buildings. We currently have 18 buildings. Architects, contractors, people that have run schools for a long time ask me all the time, why does Greater Clark have so many buildings for 10,000 students? It's not cost effective. It costs a lot more money to operate that many buildings, which means that's less money going to the students, going to the teachers in the classroom. And so we're trying to be efficient with the resources. I mean, the bottom line, we don't think the enrollment supports having a middle school down there where Parkview currently is, and also building another new middle school out just past the roundabouts there. We feel like the enrollment and the demographic study supports us building a new middle school on that site, where Twilight is, just past the roundabouts out there. If you look at what's going on with growth, and you talk to city officials, you talk to county officials, in the next 5 to 10 years, there could be another 2,000 to 3,000 homes out there just past the roundabouts, in that open land that's out there. And where are those kids going to go to school? We need a school out there.
Now, I want to transition this, but as a reminder for people, as Mr. Laughner has mentioned today, August 18th, 6 o'clock, you'll be at a Parkview Media Center there talking open Q&A for everybody if they have questions or want to hear more data. So keep that in the back of your mind if you'd like to show up. And that's on August 18th today at 6 p.m. The last topic I have for you here, when you look at Greater Clark, and this is not just a Greater Clark issue, but it's a national issue. I know we're still dealing with teacher shortage and trying to deal with the busing situation. I know for you, busing's gotten better this year. Teaching still, I know, is very difficult. Tell me from your viewpoint, when you meet with your cabinet and you meet with the school board, what are some of the plans long term, whether it be teachers, school bus drivers? How do you find a way to bridge that gap? Because it doesn't seem like anybody has an answer across the country. How do you work on trying to keep people here and also bring people in? What are some of the long-term solutions? Because it feels like right now it's just a lot of just pulling parts together and doing whatever you can do. Is there any plans long-term of we need to do this and that? What are some of your thoughts as you look forward? Because from a shortage standpoint, it's still, I know, a difficult situation.
Yeah. Well, and before I go to that, I do want to mention one more thing about the Parkview situation. There's a lot of concern about, well, what about those 155 downtown kids? That school is going to be 6 miles away. We're going to make sure those kids are taken care of. Whether it's activity buses after school so those kids can participate in extracurricular activities. We're going to make sure they have transportation, that they can be involved in extracurricular activities after school, and that they get home, after they're done practicing or involved in that event. So, we're going to make sure that they're taken care of. Now, in terms of the teacher shortage and just staffing shortages, we were fortunate in Greater Clark because we started real early. We anticipated this coming, and we started early to get our people hired. And I think when school started, we had maybe one opening, for certified staff. But I think the answer is, at the school district level, is we have to build good relationships with our local universities. We also have to grow our own, through our academy model, and identify students in high school that want to be teachers and support them, whether it be through scholarships or mentoring or whatever, to get them to go into the teaching field and stay in the teaching field. One of the things we're doing right now is we created positions called teacher fellowship positions, where college students come in and work 15 to 25 hours a week in our schools while they're going to college, and it's students that are interested in teaching. So they're in a building working instead of waiting tables or working at a fast food restaurant. They're working in our schools. Our hope is that those students, we have about 20 of them right now that are in college working in our schools, that that they'll like what we do in Greater Clark. They'll enjoy their experience in our schools, and once they finish up their degree, they're going to want to work for us in Greater Clark, and we think that'll be the case. So we're continuing to pursue that. Now at the state level, I think we need help from community in trying to get our state legislatures, our state Senate, state House, the governor, to provide more funding to public education. I mean, when you look at how the average teacher pay of Indiana teachers is the lowest in the Midwest. The average teacher pay in Kentucky, Illinois, Michigan, and Ohio, all the states that surround Indiana, is higher than the average teacher pay in Indiana. And the bottom line is our state legislature has not funded public education adequately, and because of that, our teachers haven't been given the pay they deserve, and also it affects bus driver pay, classified staff pay, and it starts right there, that our state legislature needs to step up and start providing funding, adequate funding, to our public schools, so that we can pay our teachers appropriately. I think right now, when you look at students that are graduating from college, they can go out and get a job in a different field instead of teaching and make $15,000, $20,000 more in that field versus education. And so young people are not getting into teaching like they used to because of the pay difference. And the real concerning thing is that universities, what I'm hearing from universities, is that their teacher education enrollment has dropped in half over the last 10 years. And that's concerning because that means this problem isn't going to get better anytime soon. It's only going to get worse. And right now the state legislature needs to step up and start funding public education and making sure teachers get paid what they deserve to get paid.
Mr. Laughner, as we wrap up here, I'll let you finish it here. Any final message to students, parents, as we start the year off here? Anything you'd like to add?
Well, thank you for your patience. I mean, it's been a good start to the school year, but we know there's been some little things with transportation here and there. We hope that you continue just to reach out. If it's a transportation issue, reach out to Daniel Borders and Transportation. He's great at responding. If it's something to do with our schools, reach out to the administration building, whether it be Melissa Bauer, our Director of Secondary Schools, or Karen Wesley, our Director of Elementary Schools. Our hope is that if you have an issue, you start with the teacher, if it's a classroom issue, or the principal of your school, talk to them first, try to solve that issue at the school level, and then if you don't get the answers that you wanted or get the problem solved, then obviously go up the chain of command and we'll work to try to solve your problem at the administration level. But if there's an issue, please start with your teacher and your principal first and see if they can work it out first. But we expect to have a great year. Like I said, our focus this year is academics and really getting back to refocusing our efforts on academics and making sure our students grow academically and are successful.
Well, Mr. Laughner, appreciate you coming in. I know you, like I said, you got a busy schedule, especially at night going to Parkview and having the speech there, but look forward to having you back in soon, and thanks for stopping by.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's Mark Laughner, our superintendent of Greater Clark County Schools, joining us today at the WJHI studios for another edition of School Talk. Just a reminder, you can watch School Talk on Cable 184, along with it being available on our social media channels through Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Also available on the radio at 98.5 FM and WJHI.com. For Mark Laughner and our student, Stacy Wilder, I'm Clay Abel saying so long, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of School Talk right here on 98.5 WJHI, LP Jeffersonville, the home of the Red Devil Network.